Howdy everybody, welcome back to the Metal Mill 52 workshop. Got some updates for you and some next steps on the pillar tool, so join along. Thanks for being here, thanks and welcome to the new subscribers. The first thing I wanted to talk about today is the next pieces that I'll be making for the pillar tool, and I wanted to introduce you to a couple of resources that would be handy. Before I get into those details, let me cover what I made during the week. I made this bolt that has a little pin that's Loctited in there, and what the book calls a snug, which is a little knurled nut that you can use and tighten by hand. And these parts are for the what they call in the book the rotatable stake, which is, there's actually 4 parts to the project. The center nut of bolt, of course, the nut or snug as we just talked about, and the next thing that I'm going to make is the base, which is really pretty simple. It's going to be some work though, machining all this steel off of a chunk of steel that I've got on the lathe right now. I've got a 2.5 inch diameter rod of steel, and I need to machine down to 3/4 of an inch for 1 inch and 9/16. So that's my next thing to do. I'll put a little chamfer here, and then what my plan is to flip it around, put the 5C collet chuck back on, and hold this part in the 3/4 inch part in the 5C collet chuck. Also, I want to check and make sure that this fits in one of the arms of the pillar tool, because that's how this thing gets mounted. And then I'll take it over to the mill. I'll mill a slot here for that little tab that it's an anti-rotating tab. I'll mill a little slot for it there, and I'll drill a large hole, which is where the work pieces will go through. This is a top view here. There's a few things that I'm not going to do that the book called for, and the resource that I looked at the design, and I don't really understand exactly why they did things the way they did, but as I mentioned when I started the project, I collected the old Shop Machinist magazine articles on the pillar tool, and the author talks about the rotating stake, and he omitted a few of the pieces. It's on page 25 of the issue I just showed you. He omitted a few of the pieces. His sketch is just slightly different, and I'm actually going to make mine a little bit more like his than like the one in the book. But not a big deal. I'll talk about those things as we go along. The very cool thing about this is that the top piece, which after it's machined will get case hardened, it provides you with a bunch of holes of specific sizes that you can use for different operations. I think watchmakers use these holes. This will range anywhere from a little locating cone to a 3/64 inch hole all the way up to 3/8. So I've kind of plotted out the different holes that have to get made and the spacing apart. Like my plan is to machine this disc on a rotary table in the mill, and that way I can do all the holes at the exact right spot, and then I can scallop the edge, and so I'll have the rotating stake available. And we'll talk more about that later, why I want it. But I'm thinking for objects, staking objects, broaching, this is going to be a really handy thing to have. So I'm using one of the resources that I mentioned, the Shop Machinist magazine from July and August of 1991, and I'm making it according to that. Another resource that I wanted to show you is a website. Let me zoom in on it. There's a gentleman in Germany named Bruno Mueller, M-U-E-L-L-E-R. He's got his own website, and he's made the pillar tool and some fantastic attachments. And especially, look at this cool thing. Here he's got the rotating stake and the base and the bolt and all that stuff in it, but he's made a special arm, custom made, that can twist and rotate. So here's some pictures. I need to put new ink in my printer, but you get the idea. So he can actually rotate that arm and the stake in case there's a reason to do something at an angle, so you don't have to set it up in a vise with an angle plate. Here's a couple more pictures of it, and he's got drawings of this on his website. So if I can find a chunk of steel or cast iron of that right size, then I may try to make myself one of those as well. But Bruno Mueller, you can just Google it, and the cool thing is Google will actually translate the page. I went ahead and printed this out because I already got the idea of what's needed, and I can, whatever the pieces are, like my next, sometime here's a blown up page of the plans for that rotating arm. I'll be able to go ahead and go through, and I'll need to coordinate this to US measurements and also to translate, but it's pretty obvious what the pieces are and what they do. So stay tuned and we will keep you posted. Thanks for watching, everybody. Okay, for the third segment here, wanted to point out I'm just cutting and facing off the bottom. I've got the automatic feed going on the lathe, which is a feature I really love, and I've got it set at 70 RPM, which is a very slow setting, but it's fantastic for doing something like this. I'm taking a decent sized cut, probably a 1/16 of an inch off the end of this cylinder. My plan is, as soon as I get it faced off the bottom, then I'm going to drill, I'll center drill the bottom and use the live center to support it while I turn the shaft down to 3/4 of an inch. So, very handy to have. This will take a long time at this low RPM. Maybe I could do it faster. Like I said, I'm not a professional machinist, so this works for me. It's a comfortable pace. I'll have a nice clean cylinder to start with. And this steel cylinder measures about 2.5 inches, and I've got it in a 3-jaw chuck on the Grizzly 12x36 lathe. Could use a 4-jaw, thought about it, but this is supporting it fine so far, and I'll keep you posted as we make that. Hey everybody, it's many hours later. My buddy Russ came over for about an hour today and brought me the other Fordham grinding tool. Much appreciated, Russ. Enjoyed the visit with you. And anyway, I've been letting the machine run almost the entire day, probably about 4 hours, manually resetting and cutting down from the 2.5 inch diameter down to the 3/4 inch that you see. And as I said, this should be the final cut. I stopped it a minute ago and double checked with my micrometer, and I'll try fitting the arms, both arms, make sure that this thing fits, this spigot, if you will. But it's an 1 9/16 piece of shaft. It's a real beautiful finish. Ended up putting in a brand new piece of carbide. It's Mitsubishi carbide, or Michitoyo carbide that I bought from Grizzly. It came with these holders, and it's doing a beautiful job. I've been taking off, it'll take 50 thou off at a time. That's probably about the most for some of the cuts that I took earlier. The finishing cuts I've been taking at 25 thousandths, thereabouts. So, looking good. The plan after this, I'll clean up this periphery a little bit right here, and then cut it off, leaving a little bit of extra margin. And my plan is to put it in a 5C collet chuck, a 3/4 inch collet chuck, remove the big 3-jaw, and flip things around. I may actually go ahead and cut off the other piece that's going to be the top. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but anyway. So then I'll finish up this piece. I'm not sure I'm going to get this thing done today. We'll see. The next things, once I flip it around inside the 5C chuck, would be to drill the 5/16 inch center hole all the way through, chamfer the edges a good bit, and then get it ready to drill the clearance hole for the staking tools. So that's pretty much it. And we'll get as much done as we can today, maybe finish it up tomorrow. The real interesting thing, excuse me, is going to be the staking plate itself, because that requires some work on the rotary table and the milling machine. I'll keep you posted. Hey folks, for this segment of it, I wanted to show, this is what I was talking about. I've got the rotatable stake plate reversed, turned around. I'm holding onto it with the spigot or the post, the 3/4 inch piece that's going to go into the arms. I've got that in a 5C collet chuck, and I've got it locked down on the lathe right now using the hex wrench to lock the position in the Z-travel, so I can face it off rather at 3/4 inch thick. Getting a real nice finish, kind of a mirror finish there. Next step after I do this, I'll turn the outside diameter to the 2 3/8 inch. I'm going to make sure I've got the chamfer on the bottom, and then I'll drill and ream the 5/16 inch hole in the center. I've got my plans set up. I Xeroxed the page out of the book. I've got that set up here next to the lathe to remind me of this stuff. And then I'll take it over to the mill and mill out the little notch for the post and drill the hole for the clearance hole for it. So there we go. I've also cut, I'll show you here, I've cut out this will be the top part. It's already turned to 2.5 inch exactly, so that will remain. I've got this finish is okay. It could be a little bit better, but I left a little bit extra when I sawed it off, so that I can finish both sides perfectly flat and smooth. And then this part will have to get set up in a rotary table to drill all the holes, and I'll make sure I have a perfect finish on this, perfect in parallel, before I heat treat it. So this one's going to have a lot of work. We'll see how much I get done today. Not quite sure, but I will keep you posted. I shot this little segment just to show that after I finished turning the base for the, let me get a low angle so you can see, it's in the same 5C collet, but instead of being in the collet chuck on the lathe, I've got one of these blocks. And I tightened it up really well with vice grips on the little ring on the back, and I centered it carefully, excuse me, and then I centered the center hole, the 5/16 inch hole here, and then I drilled out the 13/32, and just a second ago I finished using the countersink tool to give me a nice little countersink there. So I'll just deburr that, and then this piece will be done. I got to deburr the bottom. I can really feel the hole there, so I'll take it out and I'll use a deburring tool. But I have my little set of blocks there. I have the square and the hex. That's one of the best things I ever bought, probably. And over here in the lathe, getting ready in just a minute, I'll switch back over here and work on this is the part that's going to be the stake plate itself that gets case hardened. So my plan here is just to face both sides, face it to the thickness, about 2.81 is what it calls for. I may not go that thin because I want to be able to keep it in the 3-jaw. This is a neat little 3-jaw chuck that's in the 5C collet holder. So I'll face it on both sides, and then I'm going to make the little indentations in it for the bolt and the head of the bolt. So I'll do that all here, and then basically it'll be finished on the lathe, and I'll have to set up the rotary table and drill all the little holes and not scallop the edge. And when that's done, then I can case harden it. Alright, just finished machining the rotatable stake plate to the correct dimension. A bored, drilled and reamed the center and bored the center part as well for the head of the bolt that goes through there, the lockdown bolt. And I'm going to flip it around and just clean up the surface on the back and recess the back a little bit. It calls for a 1/16 of an inch recess, about 1 1/8 wide. So I'll flip it around, do that, and clean up that surface, and then it'll be ready. Also, I did get the, pardon the pan. I've got my rotary table in place. Not sure I'm going to get to using it tonight, but I'm thinking about at least I can get everything in position and get ready. I'll probably I can do the hole drilling through the rest of the week and do the heat treating later. So thanks again for watching. I'll keep you. Okay, folks, well, I think I'm going to wrap this up tonight. I've spent a lot of time. I got the rotary table centered on the mill. I've got it offset and clamped down, and you can see the little dot there, perhaps. Let me turn some light on. There, that's, I put a Sharpie inside the drill head and mark the spot. So that's the offset. That's where the circle is going to be for the pitch circle diameter for the row of holes for the stake plate. And the next thing, I'm not quite sure. What I don't like is I'm going to have to, I won't have to move these clamps while I'm drilling the holes, and that's a good thing. Also, I've got it up on some 1/2-inch steel spacers, but I also put a plate of aluminum as a sacrificial base there. So, because the drills need to go all the way through, obviously, so they'll go into the aluminum, and I'll know that that's as far as they need to go, and they won't hit the hardened steel base, the 1/2-inch spacers that I've got down there. So that's what that aluminum is for, in case you're wondering. And the tricky part will be taking it slow, taking it easy, and drilling the really, really tiny small holes that get started. And then when we get all done, I think I would like to scallop the edges. I think that looks kind of cool. But obviously, if I do that, I'm going to have to move the spacers, and we'll see. I mean, I'll keep you posted on that. I'll do a whole separate video about that, the drilling of the holes and then the scalloping of the edge. But I've got the rotary table set to 0, got the offset, got everything set up, got a little thing for me to sit on here so I can see the degree marks on the rotary table. That's having done stuff like this several times, you really want to just kind of tune everything else out, sit down, focus on what you're doing, and drill the holes in the correct sequence and all that. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you found this interesting. There's one thing that, not just a cliffhanger, since I made the head exactly 5/8 and I made the center hole exactly 5/16, I think I'm going to have to get rid of that little spur that I put on for the locking bolt. I really can't think of a good alternative. I guess that is in fact why they had the center hole and both center holes enlarged in the plans, so that the locking spur would fit down through, and then you could clamp it. But to me, it just seems silly, so I think I'm going to have to pull that out or grind it off. It's Loctited into the bolt. I thought about enlarging the center hole, but even then, if I did that, then I'd have to enlarge this. I have to make it just exactly like the plans, and I really don't think that I want to do that. So we'll see how it goes. But thanks again for watching. I hope you all found it interesting, and I hope you had a happy Easter. Today was Easter Sunday, and wish you all many blessings. Welcome again to the new subscribers. Thank you all for being here, and I will keep you posted.